Hi, sweetheart. Come sit here next to Grandma. I need to tell you something important. Just look at the world today. Wars everywhere, economic crises, rising inflation, growing unemployment. Everything is so uncertain, isn't it? You know, I've seen it all before, my dear. I lived through World War II, hyperinflation, recessions that seemed to never end. And it was precisely during those times that I learned the most valuable lessons in life. My grandmother always said, "Daughter, when times get tough, it is the wisdom of the ancients that saves us." Today, seeing global tensions, armed conflicts spreading, economies faltering, and food prices skyrocketing, I feel in my heart that it's time to share this ancestral knowledge. It's not paranoia, my love. It's prevention. It's intelligence. The secrets I'm about to tell you saved many families when it seemed like the world was coming to an end. They are survival and money-saving tips that every family should know, especially now that we are living in times so similar to those I have already faced. Because history repeats itself, my dear, and those who are not prepared will suffer. But first, my dear, tell me, what trick did you learn from your grandmother or do at home? Write it here in the comments. In the next video, your grandmother, will choose the best tricks you send in to share with everyone. It will be a great joy. Leave your trick there, okay? I'm waiting. Preserving meat in coarse salt. When we didn't have a refrigerator and the meat needed to last, I would cover it with coarse salt. I would make a thick layer, like a cocoon. The salt would draw out all the moisture and the meat would keep for weeks. Then I would just remove the salt, give it a quick wash, and it was ready to cook. That's how we stored the pork we slaughtered on the farm. Drying meat in the sun. I would cut the meat into very thin slices and hang them on a clothesline to dry in the sun. It had to be a very hot, dry day. After about 3 days, it was like jerky, hard but preserved. This dried meat lasted for months without spoiling. We cooked it with beans or made paçoca de carne pilada, a traditional Brazilian dish. It was a guaranteed source of protein for the whole year. Preserving eggs in lime. My mother taught me. Take a large pot, place the whole eggs, unwashed, inside, and cover them with virgin lime. Then add water until they are completely covered. The eggs would keep for over 6 months. The shells would become a little soft, but the inside was fresh. It was our natural refrigerator. Lard for preserving melt pork lard and store cooked meat in it. The lard solidifies and creates a protective layer that prevents air from reaching the meat. It lasts a long time this way. I also did this with sausage. Just heat it up a little, and the lard melts, and the meat is ready to eat. Smoking on a wood stove. We used wet sawdust on the wood stove to smoke meat and fish. The important thing was to make a lot of smoke without too much fire. We left the meat hanging in the chimney for days. Then it had that special flavor and kept for a long time. It was an old method that never failed. Preserving vegetables in sand. I made a box with dry sand and buried carrots, potatoes, and beets with the leaves facing up. The sand kept the right moisture level, and the vegetables stayed fresh for months. In the winter, when there were no vegetables in the garden, I would just go to the sandbox and get fresh vegetables. Salt water for preserving. I made a very strong brine, water with lots of salt until it wouldn't dissolve anymore. I stored cheese, olives, palm hearts, everything I needed to preserve. The salt created an environment that prevented bad bacteria from growing. It was our natural preservative and worked perfectly. Drying fruit on the roof. I would cut the fruit into slices and place them on a screen on the roof to dry. Apples, peaches, grapes. Everything became fruit leather. I would store it in tightly sealed jars and have sweets all year round. In the winter, I would cook these dried fruits with a little sugar and make a delicious compote. Preserving milk. Without a refrigerator, I would boil the milk and put it in a pot inside another pot filled with cold water. I would change the water several times a day to keep it fresh. Or I would make curd. I would let the milk curdle naturally and store it in cold water. That was our way of having dairy without a refrigerator. Planting a winter garden. In the fall, I would plant kale, cabbage, winter lettuce, radishes, vegetables that can withstand the cold. That way, even when other plants died, I still had fresh vegetables in the yard. And kale, needless to say, the colder it got, the sweeter it became. Preserving food in glass jars. I sterilized glass jars by boiling them in water for 10 minutes. Then I filled them with cooked vegetables and covered them with boiling water and salt. I closed them tightly and stored them in the pantry. They lasted the whole year. Cucumbers, chayote, green beans. Everything could be preserved this way. Cloth napkins. I never bought paper napkins. I made cloth napkins that I washed and reused. Each person in the family had their own, in a different color. It saved a lot of money and looked nicer on the table. They lasted for years and years. Reusing bath water. I collected the first batch of bath water, which was cold, in buckets to use for cleaning, watering plants, and flushing the toilet. I also taught the children to take quick baths. Get wet, close the door, soap up, and open the door again. It saved a lot on the water bill. Making soap with ash, I collected ash from the wood stove in a tin can. When it rained, the water passed through the ash and turned into lye, a very strong alkaline water. I mixed it with used oil, and it became a powerful soap that cleaned everything. It was a natural chemical that cost nothing. Storing potatoes in the ground. I dug a hole in the yard, lined it with dry leaves, and placed the potatoes in layers, always separated by leaves. I covered everything with soil. The potatoes stayed fresh for months without sprouting. It was our natural underground pantry. Reusing rainwater. I would place all possible containers to collect rainwater. Buckets, pots, jars. This water was used for everything. Washing clothes, cleaning, watering plants. It was pure water, without chlorine, and free. I would store it in drums to use later. Making sugar-free jam. When sugar was expensive, I made jam using only very sweet fruit and a little honey. I cooked it until it thickened and stored it in sterilized jars. Ripe fruit has enough sugar to preserve itself. It was naturally delicious. Preserving braided onions. After harvesting, I would braid the onions by their leaves and hang them in a dry, airy place. They would last all winter. I would start using the ones that ripened first. It was beautiful to look at and very practical. Clay pot for water. I used a clay pot to keep the water cool, even in the heat. The clay sweats and cools the water naturally. It was our refrigerator for water, and it tasted much better than in a plastic container. Storing garlic in lard. I would peel the garlic cloves and store them in melted lard in a jar. The lard would solidify and the garlic would keep for months. When I needed some, I would just take a few cloves out. The flavor was preserved and it never sprouted. Growing sprouts at home. I germinated beans, lentils, and chickpeas indoors, using only water. In a few days, I had fresh, nutritious greens. Sprouts are full of vitamins and grow quickly. They were our guaranteed salad even when we didn't have money to buy vegetables. Drying herbs for seasoning. I harvested herbs from the garden, basil, oregano, thyme, and hung them in bunches to dry. Then I stored them in tightly sealed jars. I had fresh seasoning all year round. It was much better than store-bought and didn't cost a thing. Preserving fish in salt. When I caught a lot of fish at once, I cleaned it well and covered it with coarse salt. I let the water drain for a few days, turning it over from time to time. The fish became salty and preserved, just like cod. It lasted for months without spoiling. Making homemade vinegar. When wine turned sour, and it always turned sour a little, I didn't throw it away. I let it ferment some more until it turned into vinegar. I put it in a bottle with a cloth over the top to let the air in. In a few weeks, I had strong homemade vinegar for seasoning and preserves. Planting sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes were our salvation. They are easy to grow, produce a lot, and last a long time after harvesting. One branch yielded many potatoes. We cooked them, baked them, made sweets. They were a guaranteed and nutritious food for the whole family. Preserving cheese in wax. When we had large pieces of cheese, we melted beeswax and spread it over the entire surface of the cheese. The wax created a protective layer that prevented mold from growing. The cheese kept for a long time. We just scraped off the wax when it was time to eat. Collecting salt by the sea. Those who lived near the sea collected salt water and let it evaporate in the sun. Pure salt was left at the bottom of the container. It was our free salt. Those who lived far away traded products with those who lived on the beach. Making sugarcane. Sugarcane was planted in the backyard and used to make homemade brown sugar. The cane was ground, the juice was boiled until thick, and then poured into molds. It was sweet and nutritious. It was our dessert and natural sweetener. Preserving butter in a jar. We made butter by churning cream and storing it in a tightly covered clay jar, covered with salt water. We changed the water from time to time. The butter was preserved without a refrigerator. It was important to change the water often. Drying corn for cornmeal. I let the ears dry on the stalk, then threshed them and stored the dry kernels. When I needed it, I pounded it in a mortar or took it to the mill to make cornmeal. We had cornmeal all year round to make polenta, cornbread, porridge. Preserving green tomatoes. I picked tomatoes that didn't ripen before the first frost, wrapped each one in newspaper, and stored them in boxes in a dark place. They ripened slowly and we had fresh tomatoes until the end of winter. Making garlic paste. I would crush a lot of garlic with salt until it became a paste. I would store it in a small jar covered with olive oil. The salt and olive oil preserved the garlic for a long time. It was a ready-made seasoning for any food. Planting climbing beans. Climbing beans yielded much more than regular beans. I would plant them on the fence, and they would climb and produce beans all the time. They were fresh beans in the summer and dried in the winter. A small crop fed the whole family. Preserving lemons in water. I kept whole lemons in jars with water, changing the water every 2 days. They lasted much longer than out of the water. Lemons were very important. They were used as medicine seasoning and for making preserves. Fermenting cabbage, sauerkraut. I would cut cabbage very thinly, mix it with salt and press it well in a bowl. I would cover it with a plate and weigh it down. It would ferment for weeks. It would become sour and keep for months. It was a source of vitamins in winter when there were no fresh vegetables. Drying bell peppers and chili peppers. I would string whole chili peppers on a string and hang them to dry. I would cut the bell peppers into strips. Once dry, I would store them in cloth bags. I had strong, colorful seasoning all year round. Making cassava flour. I grated cassava, squeezed it to remove the poison, then roasted it in a pan, stirring constantly. It turned into dry flour that lasted a long time. It was a guaranteed source of carbohydrates and a staple food. I made tapioca, beiju, pirão. There you go, my love. Those were our secrets to survival. It may seem like a lot of work, but when we had to, we found a way. And you know what? The food tasted better. The family was closer because everyone helped, and we appreciated every grain that came to the table. Nowadays, you have conveniences that I never dreamed of having, but it doesn't hurt to know these old tricks, right? You never know when you might need them. What's more, many of these tips help you save money and are healthier than processed foods. I hope you enjoyed these memories from my grandmother. They are life lessons that have been passed down from generation to generation. Now it's your turn to keep this knowledge and maybe teach it to your children and grandchildren too. A big kiss full of love, and may God bless your family always, my dear.